Hi everyone, this is Lara Hammock from the Marble Jar channel, and in today's video I'll go through the basics of budgeting. What is a budget, why do you need one, and how do they work? This is the first of a three-part series on budgeting. So I've been keeping a budget since I was in my early 20s. I grew up in a super frugal family and I like numbers, so for me it was a natural fit. A couple of years ago, I started volunteering as a financial mentor. And what I realized in this process is that not everyone has a great sense of what a budget is, why it is important, and how it works. So this video is my attempt to break that all down. First of all, what is a budget? People absolutely hate the notion of budgeting. It makes them feel very constrained. But a budget is really just a plan. It is a plan detailing how you want to use your income. It can certainly feel constraining, but it is really just an agreement that you are making with your future self about your financial behavior. This plan or budget can be really detailed or it can be quite simple. So why budget? People generally know the answer to this question. You budget so that you can make sure that you have enough money to save for the future or to pay down your debts. Everyone has some big and some small financial goals. Budgeting is the nitty-gritty tactics that make sure you have enough money to achieve those goals. But I actually believe that there's another reason for budgeting: freedom. Generally, people think of budgeting as being constrictive and limiting, and that may be true in the short term, but once you are able to put some money aside, it can be incredibly freeing and liberating. You are now free to live now since you know that you are saving for the future. You can feel good about this big purchase since you have diligently saved for it. It's a way out of your financial prison and all of the anxiety that goes along with that. Okay, so how does it work? The third video in this series is going to cover this process in much more detail, but here is how a budget works at its most basics. You have money coming in or income. A certain part of that income is going to be spent on living expenses. What is left over can either be saved for short or long-term goals or used to pay down debt. Simple, right? So the issue is right here. Sometimes our living expenses are so erratic or large that there is either nothing left over or, even worse, it exceeds our income, creating even more debt. So if you've racked up a bunch of consumer debt, you're probably turning to budgeting to help you get things under control. The four components of successful budgeting are goals, so figure out what your financial goals are; current financial behavior, so collect data to determine what your current financial graph looks like; make a budget, figure out a plan to change your current behavior in order to meet your goals. This will usually involve either increasing your income or decreasing your expenses, or both. And finally, monitor progress. So checking on a regular basis to see how your actual behavior matches against your planned behavior to ensure that your budget is on track. So let's go through these briefly one at a time. Goals. So everyone is different. Everyone has different goals. However, some goals are more or less universal. Everyone needs to save for retirement, everyone needs to save for an emergency like losing a job, and everyone needs to save for unexpected expenses like a down payment on a car or fixing your roof or a big orthodontist bill. Retirement, if at all possible, should be taken out of your paycheck before you even see it. So after retirement is taken out, you have this hunk of income. So 30% should be used for savings. You can slice and dice this any way you want, but one way is 10% for absolute emergency. So hopefully you'll never have to tap into this, but you should save up to about 3 to 6 months of living expenses for your absolute emergency. 10% is considered like a slush fund. So that would be like new bedroom furniture or surgery, or, as I said, kids orthodontia. 10% is other. Some people give this to charity, some save this for college education. This is going to be different for each person. So if you're in debt, you should build up a little bit of a cushion, but otherwise use all of that 30% to pay down your debt. Saving is not worth much if you're paying a bunch of interest on outstanding debt. So once you've paid off your debt, you can start to work on your goals. Okay, so now you have 70% left to pay for expenses. Well, first let's determine your current graph. So if you are in a fairly steady state and your expenses are fairly predictable, you only need about 3 months of financial transactions to figure this out. Go back through your bank statements, credit card bills, etc. Gather all the information that you can about how you have spent your money in the last 3 months. Then you work out your income and your living expenses. If your graph looks like this, you might not even need to create a budget. You are already saving well. Unfortunately, that is not usually what this exercise shows you. Does it look like this? Or even worse does it look like this. If you want to be able to save it all, you need to create a budget. So you have two options if you want to create savings. You can either increase your income or you can decrease your expenses. So for most people, working on controlling expenses is so much easier than trying to find new ways to bring in more money. In order to do this, we're going to have to break down your expenses right here. So I'm going to go into all the different types of budgeting in another video, but basically you need to group expenses with other like expenses to figure out what you are actually spending your money on and to limit the spending that is unnecessary. So basically you're going to end up with a sense of how this big block of expenses was split into categories. So I like to think of these categories as buckets. Some buckets have a bunch of money in them, some not as much. Budgeting is the process of determining how much money should go into each bucket. If you've been spending $1,000 a month on groceries, maybe you can shave that down to $800 instead. If you can reduce the amount of money you have to put in a bunch of buckets, you can decrease your expenses and start to save. Your eventual goal should be to get to 70% expenses and 30% savings, or even lower expenses if you can swing it. So that said, here's what I would recommend. If you aren't at 70-30 yet, do not immediately create a budget that is so unrealistically low that you're never going to meet it. So that is a great recipe for quitting this altogether. Budgeting is almost exactly like dieting. You have to make small changes over time that are realistic and achievable. Put yourself on a plan to cut expenses little at a time over 6 months. You will need to give yourself time to make some adjustments. And finally, monitor progress. So it's all well and good to put a budget in place, but if you never check to see how your actual expenses are doing against your plan, it's not going to be very useful. Regularly monitoring helps to keep you on track and to make good decisions. Write down your expenses, compare them against your plan or budgeted number, and make adjustments if needed. So that is the big overview on budgeting. What a budget is, why you would need one, and how it works. Join me in my next video where I discuss a bunch of popular budgeting methods. Comments are always appreciated, and thanks for watching.